Good afternoon, y'all, and thank you all for attending. I'm Ronald Barba, the Senior Manager of Branded Editorial at the Chronicle of Higher Education. The State of Higher Education Websites, Key Challenges, AI's Role, and Content Discovery Solutions, a webinar provided to you in partnership with SearchStax. Colleges face ongoing challenges, from trying to sustain enrollment numbers to making sure their students are engaged and staying on path to earning their degrees, to finding ways to just keeping overall costs down. And unfortunately, things won't get any easier, particularly for folks within enrollment and marketing functions at higher ed institutions. An enrollment cliff is projected to start next year that will reduce the number of high school graduates by about 13% by the year 2041. And as we'll touch on later in the conversation, colleges are also facing a so-called search cliff that will make it even tougher for institutions to find and recruit students. Today, we'll be focusing our discussion on the university website, a key part of every institution, but it's a part that's often overlooked as a priority for colleges. In a recent survey of more than 225 higher ed professionals across colleges conducted by the Chronicle brand studio, 93% of respondents believe that improvements to their institution's website experience will impact key student success metrics, including recruitment, retention, and engagement. Which leads us to ask, where's the disconnect, right? And what can colleges do to improve their website experience to help them solve some of their current challenges? In today's webinar, we'll dig deeper into those questions, and we'll also preview some of the findings from the survey that we conducted. Throughout this discussion, please submit your questions and comments in the Q&A, and I'll try to raise as many as I can. But also let us know what's happening or what you're seeing at your campus when it comes to the issues that we'll discuss in today's webinar. We'll also, after the webinar, you'll also receive an email with a link to this recording, as well as a copy of the report that goes through our survey results. So I'd like to introduce today's panelists. We have Jeff Dillon, a higher education digital strategist at SearchStax. And we have Corey Reed, the Director of Web Management at Texas Christian University. Thank you, Jeff and Corey, for taking time to join us today.
Thanks, Ronald. Good to be here.
Yeah, happy to be here, Ronald.
Yeah, so let's get off the conversation. So the university website, right? Whether you're a prospective student, you're a current student, you are a parent, faculty member, or just a community member, you're faced with kind of this digital wilderness when you approach, their institution's website. Every person has their own individual needs. They have their own goals for why they are going through a college's website. And it's just this one big complex kind of body. Jeff, as someone who has worked with a lot of colleges and universities, could you talk more about kind of like what has led to the complexity of a college website?
Yeah, we should start there. I was a web director, so I lived this and saw really, if you go back 10 to 15 years ago, when the CMS was this new great thing, it starts with content management, I think. We had to take the weight off of our webmaster. It was just too much for them to update content. But after years of managing a content management system, there's hundreds of people that are probably managing content on campus websites. A lot of these systems haven't evolved too much, or we're in an evolution process now. We've grown and we have all these data silos. And so we have kind of content sprawl is one. And the content is in all these formats and all these silos everywhere. But then you combine that with the personas we're trying to reach, right? We have our students, we know that. Prospective students are really important. We have all these internal audiences too. We have community members. And then we have the disparate, different, I would say, subdomains in colleges. So I've worked in other industries as well, and I would say higher ed is really complex just because of this decentralization and the number of personas that we have to work with and satisfy.
Corey, in your job, in your role at TCU, is that, what Jeff just described, is that something that you're seeing? Is that kind of what you've experienced?
It is, and it's interesting because you'd think those that aren't familiar with TCU, we're a private university. We have about 10,500 undergrads, right? We're kind of small to mid-size. You'd think that maybe our problems would be small to mid-size, but it's not. I think across the board, Higher ed's probably just all in the same boat. Maybe it's slightly different scale, but we definitely operate in a decentralized way. So you've had the CMS, but here it's not even just one content management solution. I mean, over if you look over the past decade, we have several. I mean, we have several at play right now concurrently. Um, and you have page templates, you have page schema that's all over the map as well. You have different products that support different features, and it is kind of wild and woolly out there.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been in college for a long time, and I mean, I remember as kind of an undergrad and graduate student. I mean, they're just navigating my way to kind of like an academic department's website was really confusing, and then they always felt really off, right? They did feel disconnected, and they felt like a completely different entity from kind of the main website that I entered, and there were times where I would sit there and think like, am I even in the right spot? Like, am I like, is this the right site? Like, is this or is this like the like an illegal place, right? Like, um, but so when we think about the college website and we think about kind of where we are right now in higher education, right? And we have the demographic cliff. I mentioned earlier that we have the search cliff. And these are things that are kind of impacting kind of one of the key metrics of universities, which is student enrollment and student retention. Jeff, could you tell me more and explain kind of the audience for people who don't know, like what that search cliff actually is and kind of what that impact can look like for colleges?
Yeah. I think we're all pretty much aware of the enrollment cliff, but what's preceding that is this um, the College Board Student Search Service no longer has access to all these names that schools used to build their incoming class with. When the tests went digital last year, it's just a state level uh, test now. It's digital, so there's less names, there's less students coming to college. So it's just kind of this perfect storm right now. Combine that with our current environment with federal government supporting higher ed less in so many ways. Uh, these are things that we can't control. Some things you just are out of our control. We're kind of at the mercy of the environment. But our website, our digital experience is something we can control. So we thought this research was really timely, and it's kind of turned into a little bit of a gap analysis with all these things we've discovered.
Yeah, and when we had a previous conversation, Jeff, you had mentioned that because of the search cliff and because of kind of the impact that it has on kind of the marketing functionality and the marketing function of the university itself, and the struggle to find and recruit those students, you'd mentioned that colleges kind of really need to lean on their websites more because it is a way for this younger generation, this Generation Z, this Gen Z that has grown up with technology in their hands and who are very kind of digital first. So it's an opportunity really for colleges to really lean on that and trying to improve it. Um, uh, yeah, I mean, is this at TCU, Corey? How have you seen kind of the different audience buckets, particularly for the younger audiences? So for current students or prospective students that you see visiting TCU's website, what does the user behavior look like? Does it kind of align with what our expectations are around how Gen Z should be interacting with technology?
Um, I would say that we're consistently surprised by some of those user journeys, right? Like we have we have a common project process where we try to map out a user journey. You start with your personas, you come up with your top tasks, you try to map out what those user journeys might look like or set up your conversion funnels. And what's interesting about anytime we take that out to live user testing is it's almost shocking at the way that people approach this carefully crafted experience that you had in mind, right? We conceive um, this happy path sort of user journey, and you think, oh, well, they'll definitely start here, and they'll drill down here, and they'll step through here, they'll go to the menu here, they'll click on this, they'll get to our form, they'll convert, and magic will happen. But when we look at traffic patterns, when we do the user testing, I'm just consistently surprised at how search centric it is, like how quickly even when maybe they know because they're taking this test for us that we're looking for certain actions and activities, how search centric their behavior is. They'll skip all this carefully crafted page design that we've worked on and lovingly crafted for them, and they go to search because essentially they've been conditioned, right, in a good way, but they've been conditioned to ask question, get answer. And I think the paradigm of browsing a website is fading on us in this era. That's what we're seeing.
That's fascinating. So it's basically you're putting in all of this work to try to figure out like how can we structure our website and our web pages in a way that students can better like interact with them and find certain things. But at the end of the day, what ends up happening is they're just turning to search. They're just
Right.
going, they're staying at top and then typing in whatever they're looking for. I mean, when you see that, I mean, are there what are the kind of the common things that they look for?
It's interesting because they are consistently looking for academic program content, right? Like that's something that throughout the year it kind of ignores seasonality, right? A lot of things kind of ebb and flow according to the calendar year, but that's something that they're consistently after is they want to understand, you know, who we are as a university, what do we offer, and what are those next steps, right? So um, uh, there's a big demand for that. And then to Jeff's earlier point about additional audiences, right? Obviously there are plenty of transactional kind of um, traffic patterns that we see where people want to know where's the academic calendar, when do I sign up for classes, how do I tour the campus, those kind of things. So, which is great because those are conversion goals that we have and have set for ourselves. Um, and traffic activity does tend to focus around those areas, which is great. So our marketing efforts are working, hopefully. But it's how they get there it's where it really diverges materially from the way that we kind of plan it out, right? We think, oh, this might be a 3-click process, or maybe we can get that down to 2 clicks, and the students and the perspectives say, don't want to click at all. You know, I I just want the answer, right? I have other things that I need to do. I've got to get to the gym. I've got a yoga session. I have a report to write and I need to get this done. And I need to do it in these little microtransactions as well, right? We used to look at Google Analytics data and we were focused around time on site. Oh, this is great. We're getting great user engagement because people are spending 46 seconds on our site during a session. And now we're seeing that number come down because we have all these little microtransactions with our users. And some people started to kind of hit the panic button about that, go, oh no, we need sticky content. And it's like, well, let's analyze this and make sure as long as people are converting, as long as we're connecting people with the answers that they're seeking, let's not get overly concerned with time on site, right? Like Ronald, if you had a question for me, and I was like, I could either give you that answer in 3 seconds, or I could make you wait a minute. Which would you prefer? And Jeff's laughing because he talks to me enough. He knows that I like to stretch things into a minute, but
I
I
mean,
think you appreciate getting it more quickly.
yeah, for sure. Um, Jeff, I mean, from what Corey was describing, I mean, he seems he what he has just described is a very almost very meticulous approach to it, right? And it's a very thought out approach to how do we improve our website experiences. But from our survey, that doesn't seem really to be really the case. That institutions don't seem to really be prioritizing the website experience. In your work, what have you seen and kind of what are the challenges that they face when it is something that they do want to prioritize?
Mhm.
So-
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think we need to go next is, they're trying to prioritize it, but what's happening is there's this disconnect with let's redo our navigation and rebuild our site and make it look really great. but search is often left out of that. So it's these year-long projects. And if you talk to a lot of agencies now, the agencies are getting it. They're like, they will scope in search when they're doing a site for a school because they know it's going to make them look more successful. So, yeah, a lot of schools are still using the free product out there, Google, for their search bar. But we're seeing so many more schools scramble off of that because we're running into things like, hey, we can't control this. We can't, we're past the days of 10 blue links, right? If you're looking for like a marketing degree or business degree or a comms degree, those are often internal departments as well. So you search for that term and you come up with all these administrative results. And I've seen even schools, they have to separate that out. So the best schools are realizing, hey, we don't really know when someone's searching for like business. Are they looking for a business degree or are they looking for the administrative business office? So that goes back to that complexity. But yeah, they're trying to keep up, but there's so many reasons why it's been so hard for them. And I think it's just a challenge that we got to tackle in a lot of different ways.
I want to throw it back out to the audience. Based on everything you've heard so far, what have you guys experienced? Is this what you are seeing at your institutions? Are there any questions that you have so far for our panelists that we can try to answer for you? But yeah, it'd be really helpful for us to kind of understand where is everyone right now and kind of what does that progression look like? So, when we are coming to an institution and we hear that, hey, we do want to try to figure out how to improve this. What can those improvements look like, right? And how does an institution approach that? Corey, I want to shoot this one to you because I know at TCU you've done a lot of really great work of really trying to revamp the whole digital experience with those different user buckets in mind. So can you talk through kind of how you kind of overhauled that whole experience and what that looked like?
Sure. So I've been in this role about 7.5 years now with the university. And when I first started, my priority task was really addressing digital accessibility concerns, right? And so I started by taking a look at the oldest sites that we had, which our main web presence was one of the oldest websites in our network. So I wanted to take a look at where our core web properties were, right? People tended to say like the TCU website, and I was looking at it behind the scenes going, they don't understand the complexity of what they're asking us to do, right? So I at first had to get my arms around it. And then, well, like you would do with any large kind of daunting project, you try to understand the full scope and then break it down into pieces. So we split it into basically a 3-year plan to say, here are how many pieces of this project we think that we could do in year 1, year 2, year 3, try to prioritize it based off of traffic, right? And then with each one of those projects that we took on, we would go through a content strategy framework where we try to understand for this particular piece of the web network, this slice of the pie, who are those top audiences? Is this principally prospective students and their families? Is this a little bit more internal? Is this serving current students? What are those top tasks? And then within those top tasks, we try to make the content around those that answered and supported those top tasks as clean, as friendly to the robots, as I like to say. So take a look at it and say, do we have the HTML tagging correct? Is there more that we could do to this type of information to help other technologies understand it better, right? So when we started this 7.5 years ago, no one out in the public was really talking about AI yet, but people were talking about search, right? SEO was still a very top of mind kind of thing. And also voice search was becoming more popular. Marketers were like to talk about voice search and what's that going to mean, Amazon Echo. How do we talk to our kitchen table speaker and get it to answer questions about TC? Like, that's a great question. I have no idea. Let's find out. Let's dig into that and understand it. And that really started a journey that has paid dividends today because it's trying to think about your content deeper than just surface level. So everyone likes to look at Photoshop style comps of pages and go, okay, I like how big the logo is. I like the colors. I like the fonts. But we spent a lot more time thinking about what does it look like behind the scenes? What do the tags look like? How are we structuring this data in a way that it can carry more meaning and context? And that's really helped with organic search. It's helped with site search, and it's helped with voice search, and it also helps with AI, and it has really helped us with digital accessibility. So it's really paid off to spend some more time looking behind the curtain to try to understand how we're formatting things behind the scenes. And then we've just done that on every project. So there's the two phases, our designer and our graphic designers talk a lot about making sure we have that branded experience just the way that we want. And then we spend more time thinking about, are we using the right markup? Is everything clean and modern and machine accessible, right? Because I could, my my boss thinks that I'm being a little aggressive, but I'm like, at some point, people will stop browsing websites and they'll think, oh, how quaint and how passé that is to think that I'm going to navigate your menu. I'd rather just give them a big search box right on the homepage and say, like Google did. When did Google do that? Right? The Google.com has been like that for a long, long time. It's just a big page with a giant search box. And it's like, what do you want to know that's on the internet? You go to Chat GPT, what do you get? You get a prompt that said, what do you want to know about life? I mean, I just think that that's the new paradigm that's coming. And it makes me sad because I was trained, as a graphic designer. I think I'm a visual person. I think in pixels, right? I like that part of it. I still have a passion for that piece of it, and it'll still exist. But I know that that's sort of like me wanting to tell Ronald a 1 minute story instead of giving you a 3 second answer.
Depends on how engaging the story is, right? Like, it has to be a good story.
There.
Jeff, I mean, what are you seeing in terms of what other institutions are kind of doing that maybe are working really well versus some approaches that aren't working as great?
I love listening to Corey's story. So, um, I started talking about this earlier about like implementing a solution that you can have some control over. Like Corey's talking about, let's make sure our content is really structured well. There's so many people, there's a myth that Corey even start to dispel there, that your search is just being used by external people or by internal. Like it's only people that are here. Everyone else is going to be using AI tools. So I want to dispel that. And Corey was saying, yeah, academic programs are being searched. So when people are getting to your search now, or your homepage or your search, they're probably a bit more qualified. They're a little more interested because they've already done all the research through all these other tools elsewhere. So we're seeing, working with dozens of institutions or more over the last year, that they are getting tens of thousands of searches on their search on their homepage. So it's a tool. It's almost that last mile that's not being addressed. Like we're doing all this SEO and this social media, but your content is your biggest asset. And we know it's kind of messy, right? We all acknowledge, everyone's saying, we have the data to back this up, that they know they're not delivering a great website experience, but they're kind of paralyzed. And what we're saying here is, this is the low-hanging fruit. It's the ROI is huge. And it's so what I'm seeing schools do well is when they realize that, yeah, search can really help us, they're taking, there's a couple things they're doing. They're saying, let's create an exemplar, search result page. So the people know, like, okay, wow, I just searched for nursing and here's the nursing programs, but guess what? There's a link for the faculty too. Here's the nursing faculty. They have 40 faculty in nursing. So they weren't looking for that, but we can build value in and say, well, I just built more credibility for my program because I showed everything related to that nursing degree. And so we're seeing schools even use, we have some data where schools aren't tapping into this data where they can get like who's not getting what they want, no result searches. That's huge. And Corey has some stories about that. But if programs are being searched and if they're not finding anything with looking for an academic program, we've seen schools that are investigating adding that to their curriculum because it's so highly searched. So doing that while using your search data to make strategic decisions is probably the big thing that we're seeing more and more schools, especially over the last year. They're realizing this is a gold mine. Like we have this on our site. So that making this experience more intuitive for the end user. So getting access to the data to use it for your own data-driven decisions, and then making that experience more elegant and more efficient on the front end is, that's why we love having Corey here, because we love how TC is using their search, and it's great to show that.
That's a really great point that you bring up in terms of, it is the value of the data and informing kind of your strategy at an institution with the data that has been provided to you through kind of this search function and kind of enhanced functions that is super valuable, especially as, colleges do try to navigate some really tough challenges coming up. So right now we're gonna launch a poll for the audience shortly. So you can take some time to provide a response to that. But while that is up, let's answer kind of one of the questions from the audience. So for both of you guys, how do we get our leadership and faculty members to understand the purpose of the college website? And that bullets are better than paragraph after paragraph. So I'm assuming kind of around content design of a website. Yeah, I mean,
Corey, you want to start with that one, or?
Sure. I just assumed, Jeff, that you solved this because you moved it. I would love to have a 100% reliable way to convince people of what a good content strategy means and why it makes a lot of sense and how to write for the web. So my web team, we're housed inside of the central marketing and communication division. And so I have some colleagues that will work with me on a project and support me in speaking to the principles like best practices for writing for the web. One of the biggest challenges that we face pretty much with each project is to convince people that the primary audience for most of the public-facing web network is for prospective students and their families. You would think that would be less challenging of an argument to make, but you would be wrong, at least in TCU's case. Like there's so many people that feel like the internal audiences are the ones that matter the most. And obviously they do matter, right? We need to answer people's questions. But I think reaching out for there is a lot of great resources out there, places like the Chronicle, there's a lot of market research out there that will validate and support the fact that you do need to bulletize your content. You do need to pare it down, you know, reduce those reading times to make things more snackable. Right, because like I mentioned earlier, we're seeing that time on site, that average session duration continue to go down, right? But we're still seeing good conversion. So that just means that people need those interactions to be to the point, right? And so I would just lean on that because faculty, they respond to research. So if you can find good research, and you can address this objectively with data, I think they tend to respond more favorably to that than just going in as a war of opinions, right? Because I don't win those.
I got to add on to that one too, because this is kind of a buzzword out there, I know, but it really does start with like, improve the maturity of your digital governance, whatever that means at your school. And I was somewhat successful with this on my last role, where getting campus-wide representation to say, okay, we own the homepage, who is it for? And bringing those discussions down a level if you can to get some consensus, because it even used to be we couldn't agree on whether it was for internal or external audiences back in the day. Most schools have realized, okay, the homepage is not internal, but it's easier said than done, but it's possible.
Great. All right, so let's end the poll, and let's see the results. All right. Jeff, Corey, I mean, does any of this surprise you, or I mean, any insights you guys have for this?
No, I not surprising if we look at limited staff and budget and content updates leading the way. I want to point out this kind of goes along with, we've realized in this research that there's I would call it an agility gap. So content updates falling behind. That's really hard when you have so many people managing content. So that kind of talks to that, in that sometimes it takes over a week to get content updated through our research by, you'll get the report. It's a huge number of people cannot update content quickly, and that matters for search too. Not just getting web pages update, but when things need to be taken down quickly or added quickly. I think none of us are surprised about limited staff or budget. That one's always pretty high, but even more right now, right? We have to do more with less. So we think this is a pretty relevant conversation. What do you think, Corey?
I agree. And I think the other challenge that isn't always reflected in this is, people will often ask, like, how do what can I do to get my project moved up in the priority list? Or how can I accelerate my project? I know you all are busy. How can we move my project forward? I have a little budget. Could we, team up with someone to help? And some of these content challenges are difficult to try to outsource in some cases to try to expedite a project, because for something like content updates, you need input from the subject matter experts in order to make the content updates, right? They're not all just things that just anyone from outside could come and help with. And oftentimes getting the time and attention of those subject matter experts is kind of more where the project bottlenecks are, right? We all, our internal projects suffer from this, where it's like, I know you're busy. I mean, you have classes to teach, you have research to work on, you have, administrative responsibilities and things, but I really need to know how to update this content, right? Or let me help you to pare it down or to archive it or repurpose it. So I'd just say that would be the one thing. Not everything is curable with budget, right? It's sort of like the myth of the man hour, or like, takes a human baby takes 9 months to incubate. You can't just add 8 more people and get the baby in a month, There are just some sort of things that can't be accelerated. And it's also a challenge, so.
One thing that I found really fascinating about kind of the study and going through, and kind of working on this report, was, Jeff, you had brought up the notion of kind of like agility and needing to be fast, and Corey, you had really kind of just talked about, there is, we have small teams and small kind of designated people to work on certain things, and we need to know who's in charge of what and kind of who's doing what. And one of the things I find fascinating, what I find interesting, is kind of when we're taking into consideration kind of where we are right now in higher ed and the challenges that higher ed is facing. It is this kind of looking at the evolving role of the marketing function within the institution itself, right? Because I think increasingly, as we'll see, enrollment and marketing will really just have a tough battle ahead. And so as we are kind of moving forward, where are you seeing kind of the marketing function play a greater role in enrollment, and kind of what are the opportunities for them? How can they try to fight for, a bigger voice and try to get attention from university leadership?
That's a great question. I think what we've seen over the last few years is that marketing, it wasn't the case 5+ years ago, 10 years ago, where, it was the IT department would say, hey, come get trained on the new system. Like they're kind of driving the show. It's not that way. Marketing not only has a seat at the table, but they need to really be bringing solutions to the campus. They know like what CRM they need, what search tool. They need to be like on the edge of that. So it's probably a little bit intimidating sometimes because maybe they're not used to that, but they're very data driven. Marketers are very data driven. Like we want to see results. So that's where we can connect this, this initiative to say, this could be your low-hanging fruit to really make some progress and really convert more of your prospective students. There's different types of things we want them to do on our website. We can set up, we can track that. So I think, I think there's somewhat of a plan they can follow is start gathering the data now. And then we can, you can, if you don't have it, there's a problem, right? Often you might not have the data, but start getting your search data now. And then find what are your goals and really map out what you're trying to do.
Corey, did you have anything to add or?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that I'd mentioned earlier that we do live user testing, and that's been very insightful for us. In a similar vein, search data, being able to have like helpful real-time search data of the on-site search, right? So we can get something like Google Search Console to see what kind of organic inbound traffic's coming in through Google. And that's interesting. And that tells us a lot about things like how um, how familiar are people, right? Are these all branded searches that are coming in? But when we look at our on-site search analytics, it's really like being able to peek over someone's shoulder unobtrusively and understand what they're looking for, and then to know with pretty decent accuracy if they're finding it or not finding it. And then I can take that data and I can then go to the marketing team or the content owners and say, here's a gap. Here are things that are getting a decent amount of search volume. People are looking for this. They're asking these questions. What can we do to fill in these gaps? And that's amazingly helpful, right? If you want to enhance the customer experience of your website, knowing what people are looking for and not finding it can be more informative and helpful than just keeping an eye on what they are finding, right? If you're just looking at page views on key landing pages, then you're like, hey, great, I'm doing such a nice job. I built a great landing page. But if you can see search analytics that say people are looking for this campus resource or that faculty member or this academic program page or what have you, but not finding it, then that's a pain point. That's something they might not report to you. They might just be frustrated and leave. But now you know that there's a gap. Now you know that there's a problem that can be solved. And then you can go hunt down the person that could best answer that question. So if someone comes and asks it again, there won't be the gap.
And when you think about it, when you're talking about search data, that's direct data versus indirect data, like page views and geo information, keyword rankings, device. That's good data. But when you have someone on your search bar, that they're telling you exactly what they want. So I think that's really important. One of the findings in the survey also was that 64% of these respondents never look at their top queries. There's top search queries, and 92% ignore their no results terms. So those are two starting points, I think. Make sure you're getting that data consistently.
When we think about kind of just the sheer amount of data that these on-site search systems need to go through, where can artificial intelligence and machine learning kind of fit into that and kind of help improve that, right? Whether that is happening currently or kind of what is possible for institutions to implement.
We both have opinions on this, Corey.
Right. I think we're fairly in alignment. Jeff and we've just had some conversations about this. So I think AI can be a huge time saver. There's some things that feel like magic with AI, right? One of the things that large language models excel at is pattern matching, right? To be able to go and comb through giant piles and mountains of data and tell you what the patterns are so that I don't have to suss that out and read the tea leaves. But where the robots often get things wrong, sometimes laughably wrong, is where they want to connect the dots. Like sometimes they want to connect all the dots, and you just need some human oversight to say, I can just tell at a glance I don't want to make that connection, right? I see where you might be going with that, but don't make that connection because if you say, hey, you search for this and sort of hit a dead end, go search for this other thing. I can tell you, like, Jeff, don't click on that thing. It's also going to be an odd set of search results, right? Because maybe institutionally, we don't have a great answer for that yet, right? That's still one of those gaps. So don't encourage people to click on another thing that's going to produce another odd set of results. And
Yeah,
so,
I got, I don't want
yeah,
to
go ahead, Jeff.
go on.
Well, I just think that that's the beautiful, most powerful and successful combination is when you let AI do the brute force for you, suggest those patterns. Like I think that the robot tell you, I think that these matches make good sense. And then have someone like Ronald or Jeff go in and say yes, no, that makes sense. That's a great fit. Hey, that's great insight. Or let's hold off on that for a minute. Maybe tomorrow, but not today.
Yep. So I think higher ed is kind of enamored by like AI. They're using it in their personal life, but like what Corey's saying, like we need a human in the loop. And so we call this practical AI. And we've been using machine learning and AI for years at SearchStax. And there's two ways to look at it. If you look at generative AI, which is what everyone thinks about, right? I want everything summarized for me. Look at how many schools are doing that right now. There's not many. A lot of people probably can't find one. Why is that? It's because what Corey's talking about, we need a human in the loop. So we're strategically working on that on the administrative console into our product to allow, like, let's say all these no results, let's suggest like what could happen, like with all these no result searches, let's suggest some results for people to just say, yes, I want to connect that right now and in the future. And when I first thought that, like, this is a way to do it, like, why don't we just make it happen? And I love that we have the human in the loop because you often see there's so much jargon in higher ed. You want an algorithm to, like, I've heard people say, I just want to set it and forget it. Well, it doesn't quite work like that. You do need access to do something. So, looking at in the back end of the algorithm, yeah, AI should be used to improve that, but it's a hybrid approach with using the LLMs, machine learning, but having a human in the loop is kind of our thought.
And I think that's what we're seeing right now in higher ed specifically. I mean, I was at ASU GSV a couple of weeks ago, and I think the trend now is institutions are more open to using AI, but they want a more active role when integrating AI into kind of various different campus functions, right? And so the whole idea of having a human in the loop is kind of core to higher ed institutions as a whole when AI is a consideration for universities. So I do want to take some time to answer some of these questions from the audience. We got a bunch of them, so hopefully we can try to tackle as many as we can. The first one, Corey, I'm curious, in your projects, do you start with the creative process to define the page structure, or do you start by defining the content and messaging?
We we sometimes do that in tandem, but we like to always start with content, right? A long time ago, the SEM folks out there said content is king or queen, you know. Content is the secret sauce, right? That's your IP. That's your real value proposition is your content. So we always start with what we call the content strategy framework piece. But that doesn't mean you have to do them in a waterfall way. Sometimes we set a couple of folks on the task of working through the content strategy while we also go and do some work on page structure. And when I talk about page structure, I'm really thinking about like document types more than just a page layout, right? So, um, we used to think about developing a theme with certain types of pages. This is full width. This one has a right sidebar. This one has a left sidebar. But we really kind of separated that out quite a bit. And so we think of more in terms of if you look at rich snippets, which is what Google's branded it, or schema, you can come up with things like this is an article, this is a product, this is a program, this is a person, right? This is a person's profile. So making sure that we have a technical format or a go-to for different types of content. On the technical side, then as the content team works through their plan and they say, here's what we think the site needs to look like or the department needs to look like, and it has these types of information in it, we can then map that to what we want the HTML to look like on the backside. So hopefully that answered the question that we were looking for.
A quick follow-up, Corey. Have you seen significant benefit in switching from a navigation bar in your header to the menu pop-up?
Uh, well, one, it's nice because it gives us more real estate. But also we saw in user testing that um, people are fairly conditioned now, I think, to look for the collapsed menu. So even when we had it open in front of them, often they would completely miss it or they would scan over it and not see that the menu is there. But when they trigger the menu and they get it to pop up, they tend to look at it top down, and that's been a little bit more successful. We haven't changed that user experience across the board yet. That rollout's gonna take a little while, so we still have both. But we definitely have seen that kind of reinforced through our user testing that people are they're more successful with the sort of nested burger nav paradigm right now.
We have one question here from audience member. As you mentioned, we operate in a highly decentralized environment with enrollment processes taking place on specific platforms and academic programs presented across various college homepages. As a faculty or staff member involved in an academic program, what are your best recommendations for managing our web presence in a way that effectively supports and improves enrollment?
Wow, that's a big question, but I would say, when you're so decentralized like that, focusing on the numbers you're trying to reach, and it goes back to the data again. And is it something that can be, a lot of these platforms can share information and there's integrations we can talk about. But I think having insight into what's happening in all these different pockets helps when there's visibility across the organization where, we can all have access to this set of data, and maybe there's a little bit of a healthy camaraderie I've seen in some schools. That's one strategy, but yeah, I might have a whole separate meeting to tackle that one.
I mean, yeah, it's a tough question, right? And it's specifically for someone who is faculty and a person who manages an academic program. They may not typically have kind of the day-to-day access to kind of websites or various things. And so I can see that as a very tough challenge that they're facing.
Mhm.
Corey, I've got a few more questions for you here. Corey mentioned that he belongs to a communications department at TCU. Is that where website responsibility typically resides? Where does the IT influence come in? And do communications or IT, I guess, do communications or does communications or the IT department have control over website design, implementation, and maintenance budget?
So the answer is a little bit nuanced and complicated, like not to use that as a cop out. But for the most part, my web management team, um, we're we provide that top level oversight. We're the point people for a centralized piece of the governance as far as digital accessibility, code quality, branding enforcement, that sort of thing. Um, we kind of directly and actively manage um, the highest traffic pieces of the public facing internet. But then we have partners around campus that they more actively control pieces of it as well. IT for us, plays a supporting role. They work a lot on the PeopleSoft backend, right? They help us with purchasing. We coordinate some different purchasing decisions. They always weigh in, right? IT security, IT purchasing, they always weigh in on any kind of technology choices that we make. But for the most part, the day-to-day management, the design, the coding, those sort of things, it all falls to my giant team of 5 people.
I think we might have time for one or two more questions, and then we are done. For both of you, are there any audiences less prone to rely on search for site navigation? And if so, do you find that audience-specific navigation and content works better for them? For example, parents. And I think, Corey, you touched a little bit earlier about this, but I'm wondering if, Jeff, you could shed some more light.
Yeah, I've seen this when I was at my last university, and it was some internal folks that were used to doing the same thing over and over. They would have the process, and we would change the site, and their nav path would go away, and it would be pretty challenging and frustrating for them. I would just skew a little bit to the internal people who, sometimes it's like, it could be a generational thing too, I would say. But yeah.
And then I would throw out there that in my previous role, it was outside of higher ed, and we worked on some personalization where it could go up to and include audience segmented navigation. And I think I saw a lot what Jeff was just mentioning. Sometimes if someone sees it happen, there can be cognitive dissonance about, wait, what happened? Something weird's going on. Hey, Sally, hey, Fred, are you seeing this? And they pull it up and they're like, no, mine looks like this. And that there's power there, but it's really easy to get kind of trip over yourself when you're trying to actually tailor the navigation itself. I think in general, navigation design is a challenging discipline. And like Jeff said before, I think oftentimes we ask that to do too much.
I think we are done with time for Q&A. Jeff, I think you have a few things to present.
Yeah, thanks for handing over. Just to reiterate some of the few most interesting findings in this report. So 93% of respondents believe that improving their website will improve student success, but only 90% believe they're delivering a great website experience today. 50% recognize their search frustrates users with their irrelevant or outdated information. So the thing about search is people often, they won't report results with search. It's a nuanced interaction, right? It's like if you don't have it, they're not going to think your search is broken. They're just going to bounce. So, and then 72% of respondents to the survey plan to advocate for AI tools to improve the digital experiences. So early AI adoption, I think, will separate leaders from the laggards in this digital experience. And then some overarching key takeaways, I would say, for today, if I could leave you with anything, is that great user experience, great digital experience is still a unicorn. Your homepage might look great, but it might not be hitting the mark, and every missed click can be a lack of conversion. And site search is the forgotten first-party data goldmine. Students are literally typing their needs into your search, and marketing can often just let those go into a black hole. They might don't have access to that. And there's data in the report about that as well. And then lastly, the AI appetite is huge, but the readiness is tiny. And practical AI is kind of our approach to that. So thank you. I would love to talk to anyone who wants to explore any more about their digital challenges. And thanks for having us on, Ronald.